Hello, remember these names: Talos, Tartar and Terrier, for these are the names of the first generation of surface-to-air missiles which entered service on the US Navy between 1955 and 1960. And these were designed to face that new threat brought by the Cold War: Soviet fast-moving bombers and their long-range weaponry. And to understand the enormous importance of those missiles, we have to return to the Second World War, when the Allies had to face new Axis weaponry which showed that there was a dangerous gap within the defensive apparatus of Allied fleets. In 1945, during the Okinawa campaign, the Japanese Air Force was defeated by the Americans, who used a two-layer defensive systems. First, up to 120 kilometers, Hellcat and Corsair fighters were guided by radar to intercept formations of Japanese airplanes. Later, the Japanese airplanes which survived that first fight had to face anti-aircraft guns to bring their ordnance at point-blank range. First, at 1500 meters, the 127mm artillery began firing. Then, at 3300 meters, began the fire with the 40mm weapons. And then, at 1500 meters, began fire with the 20mm weapons. That was the US Navy's effective defensive layout that simply decimated Japanese air attacks. But in all wars, surprise is part of the game. And in that campaign, the Japanese unleashed their most modern weapon, the Oka guided bomb. And these rocket-propelled bombs could be a great threat, because these could be launched beyond the range of anti-aircraft weaponry. And let me point out that 2 years earlier, the Germans had used another interesting long-range weapon. In 1943, they used radio-controlled Henschel HS-293 guided bombs and Ruhrstahl SD-1400. Launched from a height of 5,000 meters, the Henschel had a range of 8,500 meters and carried a 650-pound warhead, while the Ruhrstahl had a range of 1,500 meters and had a 710-pound warhead. In combat, those radio-controlled bombs sank or damaged several British, Italian, and American ships. And the most famous of their attacks occurred in September 1943, when 15 German bombers dropped 15 Fritz bombs and sank the battleship Roma. Those German long-range weapons were a serious threat, but these were quickly neutralized. Using a powerful radio signal, Allies simply cut communications between the bomber's guidance system and the bomb, and thus, these bombs were no longer effective. But then, at Okinawa, long-range bombs were faced again. These were the Oka, and these had a 2,600-pound warhead and 3 solid fuel rockets that gave it a range of 37 kilometers. In this case, the bomb had a pilot. Therefore, the Okas could not suffer from radio interference. And these guided bombs were also difficult to shoot down with anti-aircraft guns, for these were small and very fast. In horizontal flight, they could reach a speed of 650 kilometers per hour, and in a dive, this could reach up to 1,000 kilometers an hour. But novel as they were, I must point out that the Okas were not effective. First, the bombers carrying these bombs were extremely vulnerable to aerial interception, and the few Okas which were launched proved difficult to fly. Still, with improvements, including replacing the pilot with an electronic guidance system, guided long-range weapons and missiles were bound to be the future of naval warfare. Thus, a solution had to be found to neutralize these new threats, and the planes that could launch them. And for that reason, in 1945, the US Navy approved the Bumblebee project, a project that had the objective of putting into service surface-to-air missiles launched from warships. Precisely, using the long-range eye that are radars, the missiles could be directed against a target. In that way, the gap between short-range anti-aircraft artillery and long-range fighters could be filled. That project was given to the Applied Physics Laboratory of Johns Hopkins University, which, in 1943, had given the United States Armed Forces the proximity fuse, a fuse which was used on large caliber projectiles to detonate those shells near a target. And that fuse greatly improved the effectiveness of the US Navy's 127mm anti-aircraft artillery. Previously, it was calculated that 1,000 common 127mm shells were needed to shoot down a single Japanese plane, whereas with the new fuses, it was believed that only 200 127mm shells were needed. Thus, in 1945, the US Navy gave that laboratory the task of developing the new missiles. And with that task in mind, they set out to develop everything that the new weapon will require: aerodynamic surfaces, propulsion systems, guidance systems, launching ramps, etc. It was undoubtedly an extremely complicated task, and it took about 10 years to produce a result. And the result was the first generation of ship-launched surface-to-air missiles. First, in November 1955, the Terrier medium-range missile entered service on the USS Boston, making it the world's first missile warship. That missile had a range of 32 kilometers, a speed of Mach 3, and a 218-pound warhead. 3 years later, in 1958, the Talos long-range missile entered service, with a range of 90 kilometers, a speed of Mach 2.5, and a 465-pound warhead. And finally, in 1960, we had the Tartar short-range missile with a range of 16 kilometers, a speed of Mach 1.8, and a 130-pound warhead. As a point of reference, the first surface-to-air missiles entered service on land. In 1954, the US military fielded the Ajax missile, which was quickly followed in 1955 by the Soviet Union's S-25 SAM missile. And all of this quickly proved to be a serious threat against high-altitude bombers. Well, the main idea in this video is action and reaction. The use of long-range weapons by the Japanese and Germans required an answer. And precisely, surface-to-air missiles came to fill the gap which existed at medium range. Sure, there were a lot of teething problems before those missiles became effective. But the most relevant point of this video is this: for every problem we face, no matter what it is, there could always be a solution. But to find it, you always have to have a clear mind, applying the scientific method, and a genuine desire to find a solution. As simple as that. Well, I hope that you liked this video, and if you did, please give it a like or join my channel. That is of great help. Also, I have a Patreon page where you can also support me. And in that page, I have opened a small store where you can buy electronic art pieces that I will be producing and selling here in my country, Guatemala. Regards, Victor Aguilar-Chang.